Kakalosh, how are you? I hope all is well. We are continuing right now with Daf Ayin Zayin Amud Aleph 77a1. So we were speaking about the entire concept of bringing Sireh Rashi Chodashim and bringing them betum'ah. But again, remember, all the first part of the Mishnah was talking about where you cannot eat it betum'ah, you could only bring it betum'ah. So now the Gemara says, Lemeimra de kulu mimoed atu. Are you going to tell me now that this is a general rule that all the korbanot tzibur, all of the different communal sacrifices are going to push off tum'ah because they're called mued? And we had a chidush at Rosh Chodesh was also called mued. Menana mile. How do we know these words? Tanu Rabbanan was went to the Braita. Vaydaber Moshe et muadei Hashem. Moshe Rabbeinu speaks about the muadim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Mata mulomar. What does it come to teach you this pasuk? Lefi shelo lamanu ela tamidu Pesach. We only know that the korbanot of korban tamid, which is tamid shel shachar v'tamid shel ben arbaim, the one in the morning and the one in the nighttime, and the korban Pesach, shneimar behu b'moado, that it's written b'moado. Those are the only ones that are brought on Shabbat because it's written b'moado, v'afilu b'Shabbat, b'moado, v'afilu tumah. B'moado means in its proper time, whether it's in Shabbat or it's in proper time, even though they're going to be tameh. Shar korbanot hatzibur minayin. How do we know that all the other communal sacrifices, the same halachot apply? So shneimar, it says in the pasuk, ele ta'asu la'Hashem emuadechem. These you have to do for HaKadosh Baruch Hu in their proper time. How do we know the korban ha'omer and that's brought with it? Or for example, the shtei alechem, ve'akarev imam and everything which is brought with it also on Shabbat and Tumah. Tamulumar comes to teach you by the Ben Moshe Moadem Hashem B'nei Yisrael. HaKatuv kava mued echad lekulan. The Torah fixes one moment for everything. So therefore you learn from here, all korbanot tzibur, any communal sacrifice that has a fixed time is going to be brought even on Shabbat and even betumah. V'chol hanelamali. So why do we need all these things from learning from the same thing of moed? The Torah could have written it by one, and then we're going to learn everything else. So he says, tzriche. You need every single one. Why do you need every single one? Di katav rachmana, as if the Torah would have written the korban tamid. Havamina tamid sheken tadid. The korban tamid is always, every single day. Tamid shachar, shachrit, mincha, tamid shebermayim. Right? Sheken tadir kalil. And it's going to be on the mizbeach. And it's an olah, it's a burnt offering, which is completely burnt on the mizbeach. Aval Pesach, but the korban Pesach, which is not tadir, right? And it's not completely burnt, we eat the korban Pesach. So I would have said, no, that you don't bring it on Shabbat. Kamashmalan, you bring it on Shabbat. If it would have only written the Pesach, Pesach shewanush karet. Only the korban Pesach was if somebody doesn't bring the korban Pesach, they get karet. But the korban tamid, that if you didn't bring it, right? I don't know, there's no karet. Emalo, I would say you're not allowed to bring it on Shabbat or betumah, right? Emalo, you wouldn't bring it betumah, at least here it says. So kamashmalan, that you always bring it. If it was only going to be written hani tarte, the tamid and the Pesach, havamina, I would have thought to say hanehu, only these two. Yeshva and Tzad Chamur, because they have a stringency. But the Tamid, Tadir ve'Kalil, and the Pesach is an Ushkaret, which means each one of them has a stringency on its own. The Korban Pesach, it has Karet if somebody doesn't bring them. And the Korban Tamid also is Tadir ve'Kalil. It's every single day and it gets completely consumed. Aval every other Korbanot HaTzibur, I would say no. So Katav Rachmana, ele ta'asu l'Hashem modechem, that it's by everything else. If it would have been only written this pasuk, I would have had a havamina shar korbanot tzibur ba'in lechaper, all the other korbanot tzibur which only come as an atonement. But the korban ha'omer and shtei alechem, which is not an atonement, meaning the other korbanot tzibur, whether it's on the Sireh Rashi Chodashim or on Musaf of Rosh Chodesh, things like that, that's a korban tzibur, but it comes as an atonement. So there it makes sense. But for example, shtei alechem on Shavuot, right? The korban shtei alechem, or the korban ha'omer, right, on the second day of Pesach, Sefirat HaOmer, right, the Omer, Korban HaOmer. That's not an atonement. So I would have thought to say that Be'emet, you cannot, en le'atir, right, that's what it says, en le'atir ba'al maninu, right, so he comes and he says, Kamash Malan comes to teach you, Moadei Hashem, you bring them as well. V'ikatav Rachmanan, if it was only going to be written the Omer and Shtei Alechem by itself, Hava Mina Adrab, I would have thought the opposite. The Omer and Shtei Alechem, the Lime, they're much stronger, because they come to permit something. Aval hanach lo, but everything else no. So Kamash Malan refers to everything, which means this. Korban HaOmer and Korban Shtei Alechem, they come to permit. They are permitters. They're not atonements. They permit things, right? So for example, the Korban HaOmer comes and now permits all the new things afterwards. For example, Chadash and Yashan. What is Yashan and Chadash? Everything which was planted and took root before Pesach is called Yashan. They come, they use all the Yashan flour, and now they make a new harvest. So let's say in June, July, there's a new harvest. They come, finally it comes to the shops, goes to the bakeries, and now everything's considered Chadash. Now Chadash is a sug min Torah, right? We know that there's even a question, if somebody eats Chadash, are they allowed to be Shliach Tzibur? Just to show you how strict Chadash is, right? To understand what we're talking about. So what happens is that we have Chadash, and now how does it permit Chadash? So right now we have a problem of Chadash. So what do? We wait until the second day of Pesach. Korban HaOmer, we bring the Korban HaOmer, or nowadays we don't know the Korban HaOmer, so it's the second day of Pesach, and automatically it permits all the old crop, all the new crop, it permits it. And now everything becomes Yashan again. So if everything becomes Yashan again, that's why we don't have a problem of Yashan and Chadash until again the next end of August, right? Why? Because from then onwards, everything that was already Chadash becomes also Yashan. So then everything becomes permitted. So after Pesach, everything becomes permitted until August, September, depends when it is. You understand? So therefore here it comes and it says, right, that these are permitters. So Savruha, we would have thought to say, that Tum'ah is pushed off because of the Tzibur, Ubaya tzitz leratzot, and the tzitz, which is the frontal, right? This is on the forehead of the Kohen Gadol, where it says Kodesh LaHashem, holy to Hashem. That in itself is coming to be meratzeh, the Tum'ah, which is brought betzibur, betumah. The leka tana the shamat le de'amar, because we don't have a tana that holds, right? Tum'ah utra betzibur. The Tum'ah was permitted in the tzibur. Rabbi Yehuda by itself, by himself. The tana was we learned to the right that tzitz ben sheyeshno mitzcho ben she'eno mitzcho. Doesn't matter whether the tzitz is on the forehead or not. Meratzeh, it is going to come and to be an atonement. These are words of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yehuda says, Odeu al mitzcho, if it's on the metzach, on the forehead of the Kohen Gadol, it's going to be meratzeh, it's going to atone. But if not, then no. Amar lo Rabbi Shimon, Kohen Gadol b'Yom Kippur, what about the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur? She'eno al mitzcho, because it's not going to be on his metzach, because remember, the majority of the services on the day of Kippur are done with the white clothing, right? Bigdei lavan, not bigdei zahav, because the bigdei zahav, the golden clothing, cannot go inside of the Kodesh Kodashim, because if not, en kategor nasa senegor, which means that the kategor, which is the defendant, the opposing, cannot become a defendant. Which means if the gold by the egel zahav, by the golden calf, was something as an accusation against us, we can't use then the gold later on to come and to defend us when the Kohen Gadol goes into the Bet HaMikdash. That's why he wears bigdei lavan, because the majority of the service of the Bet HaMikdash on Kippur is done by bigdei lavan, on white clothing. There's no gold whatsoever. So he says, no, leave Kippur. Shetumah utra betzibur. Umikad Rabbi Shimon savar, tumah dechuya betzibur. So it comes out that there's a machloket here. Is tumah utra betzibur or dechuya betzibur? Dechuya and utra means that tumah, is it pushed off or is it completely permitted? Pushed off means that it's only pushed off for a little bit, but it's not completely permitted. Permitted means it's 100% permitted. So therefore, that's the machloket between them. So says the Gemara, udechu le'alma ena tzitz menatzel achilot. But according to everybody, right, we are going to say that the tzitz does not meratzeh the eating of the korbanot that was done betuma. It's only Rabbi Eliezer. The Rabbi Eliezer omer, hatzitz meratzeh achilot. Rabbi Yosef omer, en hatzitz meratzeh achilot. So according to Rabbi Yosef, he argues Rabbi Eliezer that the tzitz does not forgive on the eating of the korbanot of the tzibur when somebody was tameh, and only on just the bringing of it. So neima matznitin de lo Rabbi Yoshua. Why don't we just say our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Yoshua? The Taina was we learned in a Braita. You're going to make the oloah of the basar with the flesh and the blood. Rabbi Yoshua says, "Imen dam and basar." If there's no blood, there's no flesh. If there's no flesh, there's no blood. Imen basar and dam. Rabbi Eliezer says, "Dam after basar, you could do the blood even though there's no flesh." Yeah, and then it says, "Shneimar," but it says in a pasuk, "V'dam zevachecha yishafech." That the blood of your korban, it's going to be spilled. So mani mekayem, what am I going to be mekayem? V'asita lotecha basar adam. To teach you, ma bezrika, just like the blood, you have to sprinkle it. So to the basar is bezrika, you have to sprinkle it. Avi omer, lul katan yesh ben kevesh and mizbeach. We used to make a small window in between the kevesh, the ramp, and the mizbeach, right? And there, the kevesh was not connected to the mizbeach. So what happened was there was a little tiny space, right? So he says, and there's a little space. So what happened? The Kohen used to bring on the top. So it says, so Rabbi Yoshua also it's written, V'dam zevachecha yishafech. So what does he do with it? So he comes and he says, Amar lecha haketiv, it's written, Gaveh v'abasar tochel, which means that it's teaching us that the blood has to be spilled, right? And then once it's the basar is going to be kayam and it's fitting for eating, now you could come and you could read the first one, which is basically you're going to spill the blood. Okay? Ein Zayin Amud Bet, 77b. So says the Gemara, V'hani trei kra lama li, why do I need these two different psukim? Chad be'olah v'chad b'shlamim. One by a korban olah, which is a burnt offering, and one by korban shlamim. Utzlicha, and you need both of them. Right? Why? If it was only written by a korban olah, I would have thought that the olah is more chamur because it's completely consumed on the mizbeach, completely burnt on the mizbeach. But the shlamim, which is a peace offering, it's not that strict. Emalo, I would say no. What does that mean, no? That means that we're going to throw the blood even though there's no meat. So if it was only written the shlamim, the peace offering, I would have had the havamina the opposite, because you have two achilot. Two achilot means that you're going to eat it twice, which means eating of the human being and eating of the fire of the mizbeach. So it's like two people are eating it. The human being's eating it, and also the mizbeach is eating it. But the olah, that there's no two achilot, it's only the mizbeach, I would say no. So Kamash Malan, that's why it comes to teach you that both of them have the exact same halacha, that only if you have the meat are you allowed to bring the blood, but if not, no. Rabbi Eliezer Nami, Rabbi Eliezer, but one second, it's also written by him, habasar tochel, you have to eat the meat. So how do you explain these words? Amar lecha, he answers you, how mi baile there you need it, shena basar mutar b'achila shizrokat adam, that the basar is not permitted to eat until you sprinkle the blood. You sprinkle the blood, and now you're able to eat the meat. Okay? So says the Gemara, if so, maybe the entire pasuk is coming to teach you this. So dam, afal pi she'en sham basar minana. How do you know that if there's only blood and no meat, it's the same halacha? So Malecha, he tells you, if so, nichtov rachmana, the Torah should have been written, habasar tochel, the hadar zam. First, it should have been written that you eat the meat, and then that the blood you're going to spill on the mizbeach. So why is it that it's first written dam zevachecha and then the basar tochel? Shmamina dam apishem basar, the blood, even though there's no meat. Shmamina shena basar mutar b'achila, but the meat is not going to be permitted until you sprinkle the blood. So first you sprinkle the blood, and then you're allowed to come and you're allowed to eat the meat. V'Rabbi Yoshua, and according to Rabbi Yoshua, ena basar mutar b'achila shizok adam kavachomenu. According to Shidat Rabbi Yoshua, you don't learn it from a pasuk that you're not allowed to eat the meat until you sprinkle the blood, but rather it's a kal vachomer. Just like by the limbs of the animal, right? That when you don't have the limbs, they're not me'akev, they don't impede. And if you do have them, they are me'akev, they do impede. Dam, the blood, the chilete, that if you don't have it, it's going to impede. When you do have it, koshkin, it's going to be impeding. So Rabbi Eliezer, he comes and he says, he says, how could it be that if you learn from a kavachomer, sometimes the Torah will still bring it from a pasuk, so therefore you cannot say this concept. Okay? Rabbi Yoshua, and according to Rabbi Yoshua, according to him, whenever you can make a drasha on something else, you're going to make the drasha, and it has nothing to do with what you wanted to learn. Okay? Fine. So why don't we just say that our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Yoshua? But since he said we need two things. You have to sprinkle the blood. We need the two parts of the korban, the meat and the flesh. Right? So therefore, v'tzitza achilot lo meratzeh, and the tzitza is not going to be meratzeh, it's not going to forgive on achilot, on eating, only on the sprinkling of the bloods. So how do you bring it when it's going to be tameh? So afilu teim Rabbi Yoshua, even if you want to say it's Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Yoshua holds tzitz meratzeh la'olim. The tzitz is going to be meratzeh on the olah, because since the olah is completely consumed on the mizbeach, it's going to be okay. So hatei nach zivachim, that's only going to be good by the korbanot, the sacrifices, di kaolim b'zer zolah. But by the korban ha'omer and shtei alechem, there's no olas. Ma'ikalim, what are you going to say? So says the Gemara, Amri kamar Rishon Levi. When did Rishon say this also? The Bayin and Tagte is vachim only by korbanot, but menachot by meal offerings you don't need to. Now remember that these are meal offerings. So says the Gemara, menachot lo amar by korbanot menachot it's not brought down. But now we learned in the Mishnah. What happens if it became tameh, the leftovers, right? Which is basically the leftover after you did the kmitza. Nisirfu, or it was burnt, or avdu, or it got lost. Kimidat Rabbi Eliezer kishira, according to Shidat Rabbi Eliezer, it's going to be kosher. According to Rabbi Yoshua, it's going to be pasul. So you see from your mefurash, Rabbi Yoshua says the same halacha applies to menachot. So answers the Gemara, kimidat velo kimidat. It's like it, but not like it 100%. It's like Rabbi Yoshua that we need both of them, which means that you need both of the parts of the korbanot in order to use it, but not like Rabbi Yoshua, because according to Rabbi Yoshua, Zevachim is said, but not by menachot, and according to this Tana, even menachot is the same halacha. Who's the same Tana that holds like him, but he holds even more stringent than Rabbi Yoshua? So Ve'odem, furthermore, Tanya we learned in the Braita, Rabbi Yosef, I have pierced to me the words of Eliezer by Zvachim menachot, and Rabbi Yoshua by Zvachim menachot. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer, Zvachim shaya omer, dam av mishen shabasar, the blood, even though there's no meat. And I see Rabbi Yoshua by the sacrifices, he used to say that even if there's not going to be blood, there's no meat. If there's no meat, there's no blood. These are the words of Yoshua menachot, shaya omer, komets av mishen shiraim, the komets, even though there's no leftovers. And like the words of Rabbi Yoshua, because he used to come and he used to say him in komets and shiraim, in shiraim and komets. If there's no komets, there's no shiraim, no komets. Right? Remember, the komets is the kmitzah. The shiraim is the leftovers. Right? So he comes and he says, Ela kasav Rabbi Yoshua, but rather Rabbi Yoshua comes and he says, Hatzitz meratzeh ala olim v'ala achilot. According to Shtat Rabbi Yoshua, the tzitz is meratzeh also on the korban olaz and also on the eatings of them as well, even though they're going to be tameh. So says the Gemara, if so why do we say kimidat Rabbi Yoshua? Pesula, why do we say that according to Shittat Rabbi Yoshua, it's going to be pasul? So it says the Gemara, avud v'saruf. It's only going to be if it got lost or burnt, which means we're not talking about now that if you have that it actually had it like that, but rather only if it got burned. Okay? So now says the Gemara, ela but rather, nitma leman ketani. Who are we learning this concept to do with nitma? Remember, nitma means that it became tameh. So right now, what's going on here? So it says like this, Rabbi Eliezer Pshita, according to Rabbi Eliezer, it's obvious, right? Hasha Yishlomar, now you're going to tell me if it got lost or it got burnt. Yeah, if it got lost or got burnt, deletnihu, that you don't have shidaim at all, and therefore the tzitz, right? There's no leftovers. If it got lost or burnt, there's nothing left of the meal offerings. So now what happens? The tzitz, which is the head plate of the Kohen Gadol, is not going to help at all. And still, Machshir Rabbi Eliezer is going to say that it's going to be kosher. Nitma, if it becomes tameh, that you do have it there. Mibai, is it a question? Obviously, he's going to say it's still going to be kosher. Meaning, if it completely got lost or it got burnt and he still says it's kosher, kal vachomer, if it's still here but it got tameh, that you're going to say it's kosher. Ela pshita, but rather, according to Rabbi Yoshua, ktani is psula. It's going to be pasul. The whole time, we also learned in the Braita. Rabbi Yoshua says, Kol hazevachim sheba Torah, any type of sacrifices which are brought in the Torah, ben shenitma basar v'chalav kayam, whether it's going to become tameh, basar v'chelev, it's going to be kayam, and it's still going to be kayam, uven shenitma chelev v'basar, kayam. And or it's everything else is going to be there. Remember, chelev is the primitive fats. The basar is the flesh, the meat. Zoreket adam, you have to sprinkle the blood. Aval nitmeu tarvayu, but if it's going to be that it's going to become tameh, both of them, meaning also the meat and also the chelev, the primitive fats, lo, then you don't sprinkle the blood. Alma kasav Rabbi Yoshua. So you see from here that Rabbi Yoshua holds, en hatzitz meratzeh ala olim v'lo ala achilot, that the tzitz, which is the front plate of the Kohen Gadol, it's not going to permit, it's not going to forgive for the korban olaz, the burnt offerings, or on the achilot, or on the eatings. Ela leolam, but rather, really, Rabbi Yoshua is our Mishnah. Ve'la kasha, it's not a question. Kan lechatchila, kan b'diavad. Many times there's a din lechatchila, and there's a din b'diavad. So this is the lechatchila and b'diavad. Ki amar Rabbi Yoshua, just like Rabbi Yoshua says lechatchila, b'diavad lo. He says only lechatchila, but b'diavad no. So minat teimar d'shami Rabbi Yoshua, how do we know that the Rabbi Yoshua makes a differentiation between b'diavad and lechatchila? The time was we learned to the Braita, nitma basar o shnifsal o sheyatza chutz haklaim. What happens if you had the meat of the korban? It became tameh, pasul, or it went outside of the azara of the Bet HaMikdash. Chutz haklaim, outside of the curtains. Rabbi Eliezer says you have to throw the blood. Right? Why? Because dam afli shavasad. You throw the blood even though there's no meat. Rabbi Yoshua says you don't throw the blood. La lo yizrok. Umodeh Rabbi Yoshua admits, shim zara kurtzad. If you did throw the blood, the diavad, it's going to be okay. So you see from here that there's a difference between lechatechila and b'diavad. Lechatechila, you shouldn't do it, but if you already did it, it's going to be okay. So the Gemara is going to push this off and says, no, chada de psula b'diavad mashro. When it says psula, it's already mashma b'diavad. So if it's already mashma b'diavad, you can't tell me that it's a din lechatechila b'diavad. And furthermore, chamisha dvarim ba'im lechatechila mashma. When it says 5 things come betuma, it's mashma that these 5 things come lechatechila betuma. And therefore, that's why it's not a din b'diavad. But rather it's not an answer, it's not a question. Kam yachid, kam betzibur. One is a yachid and one is a tzibur. Which means if it's an individual, then we say that it's not going to be done lechatechila, because obviously we don't hold of it, which means it's only b'diavad. But if it's a tzibur, then it's even lechatechila that they could actually bring it and do all these things. And we will stop here. B'ezrat Hashem, we continue on Sunday.